So when we met at God and Guns, as he said. Here's the picture of the shotgun I brought with me. And
is it an 870?
that's a Remington 870, yeah.
And Wingmaster.
And eventually some dude in the group goes, you know you're carrying a junior gun. I'm like, well, I'm a small dude and it fits. I had no clue I was carrying a junior. So I want to share some ideas with you that are really appropriate for you, but not necessarily everyone else when I talk a little bit later. And so, as Lou and I were just discussing everything with SCI and really how to position SCI in a very positive light in the community, one of the ways to do that is by beginning to work with the community in issues that are relevant to the community, outside of what you're doing. And so, as we've looked at this, there really are three audiences that you have right now or that you're contending with in SCI. So let me outline those for you. The first is anti-hunters. The other end of the spectrum is you, the pro-hunters, right, or the hunters. And then the largest group is sitting right in the middle, and that's just the general community. These are the people that might know about you, might not know about you, but when a news feed hits that's anti-hunting, they kind of sit there and go, whatever. Or they might even go, well, that kind of makes sense. They're just very indifferent. And so as we were talking about this, I looked at that and I just went, the audience that you're really after is this audience of the community that kind of sits there and goes, right?
They're the voters.
And they're the voters.
What word did I use to you today?
He said that they're the decision makers. And so the key here is to win their hearts. To win their hearts. They may never become full hunters. They don't have to be, right? The key is for them to feel so good about who you are and what you do that at the end of the day, when it comes to the ballot, they're going, I don't care what the media says. I'm for them and I'm with them because I know them. Because they're the ones that are making a difference in our community and the things I care about. Okay. So the general concept here is 32% of children in the area struggle with hunger. The key with a hunger issue in this area is that issue alone gives you access to business leaders across the board. It gives you access to schools across the board. And it gives you access to other civic organizations across the board. Because unless you're working with a really hard-hearted person, no one's going to look at a kid that's in their local school and go, well, just go be hungry. I mean, if there's a kid that's struggling with hunger standing at McDonald's and they don't have enough money in their pocket, what are you going to do? You're going to feed the kid, right? And so hunger is an issue that everybody can get around, and as awareness comes to it, it's Chris, right?
Yes.
So even as Chris and I were talking, he goes, well, what's the percentage? I said 32%. He goes, whoa. And it doesn't matter where we go in America, percentage changes, but that's the response we get. Because we don't, it's just not in front of us, right? We live in our own little communities, and our community might not necessarily have the need, but I can tell you the school that your kids go to has the need. It's sitting there. So,
What's the number? You put out a number in La Plata County, the actual number of kids.
Number of kids, it's just, I think it's just over 2,000. And I can go back to that. I can go back and look at the statistics and give you the link to the statistics.
And what is your term again? There's a term that you used.
Food insecurity.
Food insecurity.
So
okay.
there are two statistics to look at, and I won't get into the mud on this, but two statistics to look at. The statistic we go with is food insecurity. That typically is a lower statistic. The other statistic to look at is free and reduced lunch. These are the kids, the annual household income is less than $30,000 a year. So imagine you have no assets, no 401ks, no emergency fund, no anything. And you need to, as of this moment, start living on $30,000 a year.
So these kids are eating at school,
Breakfast,
but what are they doing on the weekends?
That's the key. That number's higher. That number, I ran it today, is in the 40%. Again, we go with the lower number because we like being conservative, right?
In La Plata County.
In La Plata County.
And where do you find those
Those statistics, so the one statistic comes from, I'll give it to you right here. The one statistic comes from, I'm getting to it. Okay, data center. So it's datacenter.kidcount, and I can send you the exact link for the area too. And the other is county health rankings, and that's .org as well.
And that 30,000 is for free lunches, and then the reduced lunch is a different number?
Yeah, we go with free and reduced. So reduced is 30,000. Free is like 23. I mean, it gets really bad. So we just clump them together because we know 30 is bad. So what I was sharing with Lou earlier today is my encouragement is that, and this is what we're going to be talking about in a bit, is that you partner with multiple business leaders in the area who come on board because this is good for their business as well. So you do this as a collaborative, but it is sponsored, led by, powered by SCI. That's the key. And then we work with you, with the local school system, because here's the key, is that when you give the food to the local school system or to the after-school backpack programs or food pantries that are supporting them, we always work through the distribution platforms that already exist in the community. When you do that, the school wakes up to you and is like, oh my goodness, look what SCI just did for us. And then you take it the next level, because now that you have that trust relationship with them, now you tap into one of the other areas of SCI, which is education. And you talk with the principal and listen, if you'd ever want us to come into a science class and talk about conservation and what that means, we would love to do that. And then you send in one of your team members, they go with a pre-prepared talk to educate students on conservation or whatever the niche is that is going to best serve the students, the school, and you, right? So the goal here, and this is, I'm tailoring this to you. Every community we go into in America, we're having these conversations, and then we're scripting the event process to produce the outcomes that are for the organization we're working with. These are just, I'm speaking just specifically to the ones that Lou and I have talked about in regards to SCI. And again, it comes back at the end of the day. Then these parents and these families and these kids are serving with you, come on in, to make a difference. And when whatever issues hit in the area, and I've been watching it, even with the wolves coming in, right? It's amazing how lies always come in wolves' clothing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so, as these issues come in, and the voters are looking at them, they're going, "Wait a minute." SCI is the group that, the Safari Club International is the group that's feeding kids in my kids' local school. Like, why are they being demonized here? And all of a sudden, the anti-hunters look like angry people.
Also, what about the idea of, getting connected into 9R or whatever, and maybe some of those teachers going to halls?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of this liberal community.
Yeah. So the key is what we work to do in our context is all we want to do is build relationship. Because at the end of the day, and Lou, you said this, and I think you're articulated right, you're not going to win the hearts and the emotions and win the debate, right, with anti-hunters. It's just not gonna, they're just going to stick their feet in the ground and that's it. It's the other group that you've got to work with. And yet, I would hope that anti-hunters come to your Generosity Feeds event, are feeding kids and are standing across the table from you, working with you, and a relationship is built. Because it's really hard to hate someone you know. And if they know you, even if you don't talk about hunting, right? But they know you, and then they find out you're connected to this, it's just really hard to hate the person you know, and that you have a shared value with. So what we're working to do as well is unite you with your community around the shared values that you have in a common cause. And then the issues that we might not agree on, they just kind of become smaller because now I know you. So that's kind of the big picture.
And now I've tasted Mountain Lion, and it's awesome.
It is so good. Yes.
It's good. By the way, a little background for the board. This is Jimmy Toma, by the way. Jimmy
Hi,
is
Jimmy. Great to meet you, buddy.
currently
Yeah.
the lead pastor at First Baptist. And I thought that this might be something that the church would be interested in. A little background on you.
On my story.
Yeah.
So, like you, I was a pastor for 21 years. I became pretty disenfranchised with church. And the reason I did was because the church was talking a whole lot about loving God and loving others and doing very little to partner with the community to make a difference. Not partnering with the church, with schools, not partnering with businesses, not partnering with nonprofits. It was kind of like, come to our space and we'll serve you. But what about doing stuff with the community? So when we moved to Northern Virginia, we actually moved there to start a church, but we were like, you know what? We don't want to just start another church that's all about Sunday morning. We want to start a church that's really about being in the community. And so we started a nonprofit and started innovating that nonprofit until it became what we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and that's mobilizing 600 people or more to create 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 meals in less than 2 hours. Doesn't matter how many meals it is, it's always less than 2 hours. And after our second event, we had done just that. We mobilized 600 people to create 40,000 meals. I started getting phone calls from people around the country going, we heard what you did in Northern Virginia. We need you in our community. Will you come? So a year later, we went to Eugene, Oregon. We went as far across the country as we could possibly go. And we had the same win in Eugene, Oregon that we had in our own community. 300 people came together to create 15,000 meals in less than 2 hours, partnered with the local schools, local businesses, other nonprofits for distribution. Everybody won. And my wife and I looked at each other and we went, well, we think we just launched a national nonprofit that can be local to any community in America. So 4 years later, my wife looked at me and she goes, all right, because I was still now leading a church, right? And she looked at me and she said, you're hurting the church, you're hurting the nonprofit, and you're about to start hurting our family. Choose a job. So 3 days later, I resigned from the church, which I was glad to do. And I've been on my own spiritual journey, good one. But now I get to do this full time. And we're a non-faith-based nonprofit because I want to work with anyone. I don't want there to be barriers of religion in the way. I don't want economics to be in the way. I don't want ethnicity to be in the way. I want people to do what's in their heart. And most people want to serve and make a difference. And so we're a non-faith-based nonprofit. In the last 8.5 years, we've empowered over 60,000 volunteers across America to create over 3 million meals to help sustain over 150,000 children. So it's just remarkable what's happened in the last 8.5 years. This year alone, we've empowered 23,000 volunteers to create 1.1 million meals to serve 55,000 children. And we're now in 28 states across America. So that's what I get to do, and which means I get to be here too. Which is, I kind of wake up in the morning most days and just pinch myself going, I can't believe that this is the life I get to live. So
The only thing, next time at GNG, you can't bring the kid down.
I can't.
I'm gonna go ahead and let you just take off. That's fair.
So what I'm going to do tonight, I know some of you are here as guests, as I am, so I'm with you. And I know you're here too because you are an influencer in business or in the school system or in some way through your connection with Lou. So I just want to say thanks for showing up. And as I dive in, I'm going to start with just kind of talking from the framework of the Safari Club. But what I'm going to do then for you is I'm going to build that out into the business sector for you and how this can play out for you and from a business standpoint as well from your leadership role. So as we were talking about a little bit earlier, I met Lou at a retreat a few years ago. It was a hunting retreat. And he and I just kind of really connected. You ever had those people in life that you just kind of meet them and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, you could be my best friend and I don't know you. And
Run, Forrest, run.
And Lou was one of those guys. So
He needed a bodyguard.
I did. That's right. So I show up at this deal. I'm not a hunter. I'm not opposed to hunting. My dad actually brought me out as a kid to do hunting. It just never stuck for me. The most hunting I do is out my bedroom window with a pellet gun, taking out squirrels that are eating my birdseed. That's kind of what I do. So last year I got 16 of them. I just get wild animals. So when I showed up at this retreat, which because of the nature of this retreat, these are like they're real deal hunters with really nice gear. I showed up with this gun, which is a Remington 870, and I found out at the retreat by some really rich dude that it was actually a junior-sized gun. And I said, well, I have a junior-sized body, so it works, right? So anyhow, that was it. But here's what I love about the Safari Club and what you guys are about. There are 4 tenets that you're really building your mission around. And again, the mission for those of you that are new here is really they're fighting for hunters and they're fighting for wildlife. That's what it comes down to. There are 4 ways that happens. One is through advocacy, the other through conservation, education, and then the one I want us to focus on tonight is through the humanitarian efforts of the organization, which seems a little odd, doesn't it? Think about that here's a hunting group and we're going, no, there are humanitarian efforts that we need to be about as well. And as I dove into that a little bit deeper, I went, okay, well, if the Safari Club's talking about humanitarian efforts and really caring about people, then what does that look like? And I quickly discovered that the Safari Club has dumped $75 million into initiatives that have to do with humanitarian services and education and conservation. I mean, it's amazing what you guys have done. And on top of that, it's really even encouraging hunters to use a portion of meat to serve communities, to serve people who are in need. And so over the years, there's been 1.5 million pounds of meat donated to help people who are struggling with hunger. So it's incredible what you're doing. And so to this end, we really need to ask this question: why? Why would an organization that is so focused on conservation and advocacy and education and hunting rights and really even fighting for wildlife, why be concerned about humanitarian services? And I think the answer to that is really simple. It's because there are 3 audiences that you're working with. The first audience that you're working with is the anti-hunter, right? These are the people that they see you coming, they see the gun rack in the back of the truck, and they just get angry. And you've talked to these people, you've met these people, you see these people on the evening news, you get the articles. I mean, you're in this, right? The other group, so that's one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum, which is another audience, are the hunters. It's you. And it's people like you, heck, in Kentucky, that are hunting to eat. I mean, really, this is how they survive. And just so you know, I have a brother that lives in that category. Literally hunts to survive. And that's how he cares for his family. And so you have these you have these 2 audiences, but then we have the massive people in between. These are the people, they're not anti-hunting, and they're not hunters, as it's Mia, right?
Mia.
As Mia said so well a little bit ago, she goes, they're the voters. These are the people that are watching the evening news and they're seeing the anti-hunters and they're seeing the pro-hunters, and they're making a decision on how they're going to vote, and this affects what you do. And that's the audience that I believe that really we need to all be focused on. We need to be focused on this audience from a business standpoint, and we need to be, from a club standpoint, focused on this audience. And here's why. Is because these are the people that can help, through their vote, attain the mission of the organization. They may never ever become hunters. That's okay. That's not the goal, right? The goal is to work with them. And even from a business standpoint, The voters, these are the people who vote with the money they spend in your business. These are the people who are for the school or not for the school, right? This is the community. From a church standpoint, they either look at the church and they go, wow, that church is really making a difference. I don't attend, but I'm for them. I'm with them. I love what they do. And so the goal here with this audience is really to embrace them and to be about life with them. The way that we do that is by uniting ourselves with them in shared values that ignite us in a common cause. As human beings, we so easily want to set ourselves up to be like, well, Lou believes this and I believe this, so I can't be his friend. Right? We come into a room and we size people up and it's like, we find out what we don't like instead of what we have in common. So the goal from a community standpoint is to unite ourselves with people around shared values that then bring us into a common cause. So let's talk about how to do that. I put this picture up here for this reason. Let me frame it this way for you. Let's assume for a moment that you do a Generosity Feeds event, as we've been talking about, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. 32% of children in La Plata County are food insecure. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And let's assume for a moment that as a club, as a business, as a school, you're like, that's insane. Like, we can completely solve this issue. We can take care of this. This is not. It doesn't have to be this way. And you mobilize local businesses with you, other clubs with you, other nonprofits, a church to jump in with you, the local schools to come in with you. You run a community-wide collaborative where hundreds of people come together to create 10, 20, 30,000 meals in less than 2 hours. And all of that food then goes to the local school system or to the local food pantry or to the after-school backpack program, whatever it is here, that makes sure that these kids who are on free and reduced lunch, when they go home on Friday afternoon, they're going to have food for Saturday and Sunday. Because the only way a child can thrive is if they're nourished, if they're full. Now, here's the beauty of this in this context, is that when you come into this room, you're going to be with people from you'll have a multi-ethnic diversity in the room. You're going to have multi-economics in the room. You can have a multi-millionaire standing next to someone who's going to receive meals, and neither one will know the difference. What are they sharing? Life, humanity, a value system of serving one another. And so all of a sudden the barriers begin to come down. And then as a safari club, you're basically leading this, going, hey, we're the champion behind this. We're gonna power this. We promote you that way as well. And all of a sudden it hits the news. The Safari Club helped create 30,000 meals with local businesses, the bank, the local school system, other nonprofits. Look what happened. So then, when this hits the headlines the next night, and 400 people in the community have served with you to meet a need that they believe should be solved in child hunger, how do you think those people respond to that newscast? I can tell you how. They go, I hear what they're saying, but I just helped create 30,000 meals to feed kids in my community with the Safari Club, or with such and such a church, or with such and such a bank, or with such and such a school. They're with us. They're for us. We did this together. Why? Because you have a shared value with them. And all of a sudden, the tide begins to change. It's a cultural shift that begins to happen. So let me just share with you what a Generosity Feeds event kind of looks like. What happens in a Generosity Feeds event is that we are creating a black beans and rice meal. So we're literally creating a meal. This is not taking canned food or high preservative food and putting it into a bag. This is literally creating a meal. The reason that we've created the black beans and rice meal is because it's the most ethnically diverse food that Americans eat. Think Chipotle, right? We love it. And it can be cooked in so many different ways depending on the ethnicity of the child that's receiving it. So what happens in these events, you'll see on the table here, There are several different boxes. These are boxes of ingredients, and then there's the right size scoop for the recipe in each box. And on this side of the table are the people who are scooping. On this side of the table, you can see the people who are passing or walking the bag down the line. It's basically a mobile manufacturing plant. And scoop goes in the bag, scoop in the bag. There are 5 different ingredients: rice, beans, a vegetable blend, because we believe that all the vitamins and nutrients should be natural to the meal, because we believe that this should be a healthy solution to child hunger. Roux, which is a thickening agent, and then beef broth, which is the primary flavor of the dish. At the end of the line, then, you can't see it here, but this bag has a Ziploc seal, and then it is heat sealed. That way it's tamper-proof. We do have new bags now. We just retired this particular bag, but as you can see, we've chosen a bag product that looks like it comes off the grocery store shelf. And the reason we do that is because the dignity of a child matters. And so when they receive this food, it needs to look like it came off the grocery store shelf, not something that was just handed out to them. That's the dignity piece. Another picture here: when we do these events, we typically will fill high school gymnasiums or middle school cafeterias, or usually we do them at the local school. The reason for that is because the local school has more credibility and influence in most communities across America than any other organization. Why? Because we trust them enough to send our kids there every day. And so if the school system gets behind it, the community gets behind it. And then it very naturally becomes free marketing. The school's like, wait a minute, we can send our kids to serve at this event? Yeah. And invite their parents to come too, because schools aren't just teaching academics. Schools are also teaching a value system. And they want their children in the system to learn the values of generosity and service. Same thing goes for businesses. Businesses are needing opportunity to build relationships with their teams outside the context of a transaction, or to build relationships with their vendors or their customers outside of a transaction. And so we encourage businesses: bring your customers, bring your employees, use it as a team building event, right? And have them bring their families. We designed Generosity Feeds when my kids were ages 6 to 9. Why? Because we couldn't find other nonprofits that would let our children serve with us for insurance liability purposes. Here, we just decided, you know what, it has to be family oriented. Let the family come. Let this be an opportunity for parents now to walk away and talk about the experience with the child, with their children, and encourage the value of service and generosity in their own kids. And let the school system do that as well. Let the business leverage that as well for building relationships with their employees, their customers, and their vendors. So you can see the ripple effect that happens. And then this is just an overall, just pictures from across the country. This is up in Portland. This lady's 96 years old. She was moving boxes of meals in her locker from the tables to the final wall that we create for the picture at the end of the day. I mean, just amazing. And so it doesn't matter if a person is 3 or 103. Come serve. Come be part of the community. Come build relationships with people who share your value for making a difference in the community. We have a lady that we've worked with for years. Her name's Lauren Eady. I went to her a couple years ago. She's now a close friend of mine. And I said, Lauren, you have hosted now 6 Generosity Feeds events with us. It's more than that now. I said, why do you keep working with me? She said, there are 2 reasons. Number 1, I love kids, and I can't think of a better organization to serve with than Generosity Feeds, because I know you're getting the food straight to the kids because of the school systems. She says, but then there's the selfish side to it. She says, flip the coin over. It's really good for my business. She said she's a real estate agent. So what she does is she invites all of her customers in her database to come to her Generosity Feeds events. The best way she can build relationships with them outside the context of a transaction. Guess who they go to? Guess who the first phone call? Guess who they call first when they're ready to sell their house? Her. And so is it good for business? Yes. I've come to a place that I'm okay with that tension. Because you know what? When we do things that are right, it comes back to us. This is kind of how the world's wired. and works with the Safari Club as well. When we do what's right, out of our integrity, it eventually comes back. This child sent Lauren this letter. He wrote this. He said, "Dear Lauren, thank you for the Generosity Feeds food. When it was Friday, my mom and dad did not have food when I got home from school. When I opened my backpack, I found 2 packs of food. We helped make it your event. That's how I knew it was you. Thank you." That can be your story too. Questions? Thoughts?
Are you, the food is given away only at the schools?
We work with whoever the distribution center is. So, for example, in Baltimore, Maryland, they got rid of the after-school backpack programs, and they started running all of that through the food banks or through the food pantries. So in Baltimore, we go through the food pantries because they're the ones that are getting it to the kids. Most communities around the country have what's referred to as the after-school backpack program. That might be run by a food bank, it might be run by a church, it might be run by the PTA. Welcome. And in that case, we would give it to that organization, and then they would work with the school to get it distributed.
To get it to
Yes.
whoever?
Yes, so what we do is we work with the host to identify, to talk with the school and find out what mechanisms already exist, and then we put the food into that distribution mechanism.
Do we know where that 32% comes from? Like which school?
We have it, just a second, I looked at the data this morning. I have it, I think we can break it down to the school in this county. I looked at it by city, so I looked at it for Durango, Bakerfield, correct? Bayfield, and then I see Ignatia.
Because I would think that's where most of them come from.
67% were down in Ignatia. That skewed. So the number 32%. That's for the county overall.
These numbers come from our local food bank?
No, these numbers come from county numbers. So you have a data center, and whoever wants the links, I'll send you the links. But data center kid count, and then the other one is county health county health rankings.org.
Is this just kids that have signed up in the school district for free or reduced lunches?
Correct. So it can be skewed from the standpoint that sometimes you'll have immigrant families that are afraid to sign up for the free and reduced lunch for fear of being deported. So sometimes the free reduced lunch numbers will be low to the real poverty levels. So yes, we have that.
So this is more of a best case scenario.
We always give best case numbers. So Durango is 27%, Bayfield is 33%, how do you say it? Ignacio is 68%. That's free and reduced lunch. We went with a more conservative number, which was with the County Health Rankings Organization. They put food insecurity at 32%. So I always go with the most conservative of the numbers. Yeah.
At the end of the day, what you're saying is 1 out of 3 kids in La Plata County
Yes.
is hungry, particularly on weekends.
Yes.
So this is Four Corners SCI. Did you do any research on the Four Corners area?
I didn't go beyond this county.
I just asked him to look at La Plata County for the
Because,
presentation.
you said Ignacio, but I actually thought of Kirtland and Shiprock.
Well, I'm sure those people are way off because they're Navajo.
And that's why I was wondering, like, how could we reach, would I just go to Durango High School and hope that somebody could get food to Ignacio? Because that would
No,
really work.
we would work with you on the front end. So if you came to, by the way, we coach this entire process, so you won't be alone, right? Okay. So what you would, in the coaching process, you would say, listen, we don't just want to hit La Plata County. We want to get out to these other areas. We will then coach you on how to build the relationships and get it out. So even if it's created here, ultimately you choose destination, right? Our goal is to meet your objectives and your outcomes, not shove something down the pipe. So if you came to us and said, we want to go further out. We've had organizations that have come to us and said, listen, we want to do it in Maryland, but we know there's a huge need sitting down in North Carolina because of a hurricane. Can you ship it out? And then we work with them to ship it out to another organization. So we don't do that a lot, but if someone's, that's part of their objective, then that's what we move to.
Our community is probably smaller than what you normally deal with, at least like just with Plata County. So reaching out to, say, Farmington in north west New Mexico is probably something we'd be interested in.
That works out.
And do you guys normally, is it normally larger communities in this area?
Yes and no. We're in Kanab, Utah right now,
Okay.
which is smaller. So it does range. I mean, obviously the suburban areas are far easier
Right.
to go into. I mean, that's
Distribution.
natural growth, right? So, and then now that we're 8.5 years in, we're moving more and more into the smaller rural communities.
I doubt we'll present any problems that
Right.
haven't been dealt with that can be dealt with.
Well, and you won't, because Durango has a strong economic infrastructure. So what we find is the rural communities that are very difficult for us to go into are ones where there isn't a strong economic infrastructure. Because we're looking to the businesses and we're saying to the businesses, all it takes is what? 10 businesses come help fund this thing, right? So this is where the community comes in. You don't have one person saying, I'm writing the check, right? That's not community.
Right.
So we encourage the community to even come around the funding. The economic infrastructure is here for that.
By the way, I've never missed any meals because I didn't like how it tasted, but it's pretty good. I've eaten it. Would you do me a favor? Would you send me?
I have 3 at the house.
Okay,
Yep.
and so we can just kind of let everybody have
Yeah.
one of the meals to taste, because actually they're pretty good. You'll take them on your backpack comes.
So what if we wanted, I mean, my kid goes to school in Ignacio, he is not free or reduced lunch, you know, and it's not because of anything, but he comes, we have money, I work.
You know the millionaire you were talking about?
That's
her.
No, not me. But I rodeo a lot, and I particularly like to go to Gallup, and that place is so poverty. There's people walking, they don't have transportation, and you know, how would we get it to, you said it, economic wise, if we did something here, but those people are bad off, they don't have the economic structure, how would we help them? Because
What you would do is decide that you wanted X number of meals to go into that area, and then we would work, more than likely, we would work with the school here to get a connection with the school system there. Because again, our preference is to go through schools, only because we know it's getting to kids that way. And the reason for that goes to a conversation Chris and I were having earlier, in that a child who is hungry is a dependent. In society, we have a responsibility to take care of that if the parent is not, right? The child can do nothing. I'm not interested in feeding a problem with an adult that just takes the food and just keeps smoking his life away.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so
Yeah, I think another thing that we might be able to do with that too, Berkeley, and that's a great idea, is maybe we generate a percentage of what we would do here, percentage of the meals. Let's use Gallup as an example, funnel that into the Gallup through a school or whatever. And then hopefully that would give Ron's organization an entree to go down into that area for their own event in a future year, to do that down there in Gallup.
I mean, they just don't have a lot of transportation.
A once a year thing?
typically it's once a year. So let me give you the ideal scenario, okay? And this is what we work to in every community. There was a school in Houston that we worked with. They had 350 kids on free and reduced lunch. None of them were being served on the weekend. So we came to the school with another organization that hosted it. They created 20,000 meals. Year one, they had 12 businesses partner in on that event. The businesses found out that there was an issue in the school, and the response was, bullshit, not on my time, not on my watch. So what happened with that is that these meals were created, they lasted about 10 weeks, but the businesses partnered then with the school and started funding $400, I'm making up numbers now, but started funding the after-school backpack program that was then launched with a local church. So within 6 months of the Generosity Feeds event, 125 of the 350 kids were being served every weekend. We came back a year later, went to all the businesses that supported the first time. We asked this question: who do you know, business-wise, that needs to join this story with you? They went out and got more businesses. Now you had 30 businesses involved. They created 30,000 meals. It lasted about 10 weeks in that school system. But then a portion of those additional businesses came on board with them. A year later, all 350 kids were being served through the after-school backpack program. We haven't been back. That's my goal.
Self-sustaining.
Yes, we are working to create self-sustaining systems. Because as the community gets to know the need, wonderful. Now, some communities have gotten very close to that, and they still bring us in because it's just a fun, dynamic party with a purpose event, right? So it brings the resources in, they get an influx, it helps the whole system, but they've got 600 people in the community, they're just having a ball. So it's just fun too, right?
You know, I was thinking of something. We have an interesting annual event that we do at SCI Youth. What an awesome opportunity also to potentially bring Ron back out and let him kind of circulate within that community and talk about this as well with the community that the 400 people that come to our bank. Just get the word out. Just a thought as he was talking about that.
Just a thought. I know there's several people in the room that have meetings they need to get to. I figured I'd just verbally state that, so if they need to transition, we're not holding them here.
We don't transition in southwestern Colorado. We just leave.
Okay, all right.
Talk to us about the dollars and cents, the volunteer requirement,
Right.
the size of the space that you need. Talk to us about the details of an actual event.
So really simple, it's $1 a meal. There's no additional costs above that. That's all in with the website registration, coaching, food, supplies. That's us sending out two or three team members, depending on the size of the event, to work with the volunteer teams on the ground to make the whole event happen. Yeah, so that's that side. Volunteer-wise, you need a minimum of 150 volunteers the day of. That's for a 10,000 meal event. And then it scales from there. So a 10,000 meal event can hold anywhere from 150 to 325 people. And then as we start, you don't have to scale up in 10,000s. We can scale whatever number you want, right? But as
So
that
2,500 or 5,000.
right, or 1,236,
Right.
12,036, I don't care, right? So we'll scale with you, and then there's just a sliding chart of what's the cap number of people. So sometimes organizations will say, we want 600 people, and then what we'll do is we back it up, and we go, then you need to do 30,000 meals. Others will say, we want to do 30,000 meals, can we do that with 350 people? And the answer on the scale is, because there's always a range, yes.
But we still need to come up with the dollars.
Correct, but we coach that too. So that comes down to it's always business leaders in the area that are going, wait a minute, I'm gonna get marketing out of this. So we market the businesses in the area through our social media, through the website. They're marketed at the event. So usually businesses take it right out of their marketing budget line, is how it typically works. And you'll have a business go, hey, typically there will be one business that's kind of the lead that says, we're in for $2,000, I'm making up numbers again. And then the conversation is they just go to 4 other buddies they know, and go, listen, here's what we're doing, here's the need, here's what we're doing, we're in for 2,000, I want you to match me.
And we're
And it's
in
done,
for a
right.
portion
And Safari
As a-
Club is
as a
in for
club.
portion, right.
as well, so.
Yeah. So it just, again, once the storyline starts being told, it just starts rolling. More often than not, we have groups like this over fundraising, and so we actually stop the process is what ends up happening. But again, that's our coaching process. We're dialed into how that works, and we have all the tools for it as well.
What time of year is this usually happening?
Usually it's best done during the school year, because again, we always encourage a partnership with the school. So
Is it fall or spring or middle of winter?
it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. If it's a heavy snow area, we would encourage spring or fall, because we'd hate for it to be thwarted because of weather, right? So we have some of these conversations. The events that happen during the summer and what we would consider our off season, usually those are corporate events like the Volkswagen, Dun and Bradstreet, Accenture. So they're using the larger corporations in the U.S. we're working with are using it as team building during the summer, during this kind of summer of service programs for corporate social responsibility. So.
Ron, in your experience being involved in this, obviously this is a kind of geared towards weekend feeding of kids that don't.
Right.
Talk to me about summer, when kids don't have school and free lunch at school and blah, blah, blah.
So that's very community by community. There is a federal program that the USDA does. This actually plays into churches really well. There has to be a nonprofit partnered with a school. In most cases, it's a church. And so this would be part of like a vacation Bible school type of piece. And the USDA provides food, and then the church and the school, or the nonprofit and the school, work together to feed kids throughout the summer. In other communities, you'll have the PTA will just keep running a program throughout the summer, and kids can come pick up at places. It gets messy. It just flat out gets messy. So I wish I had a better answer, but it's so much community by community, and yet we have organizations that will say to us, we want a package in May or June so the food is there to give out over the summer, because they have the infrastructure for delivery. So.
We've had a little bit of discussion about this before, but just to kind of put it out there again, as a hunting organization, we generate a lot of protein. And because we tend to generate a lot of protein, is there any way to, certainly not USDA, it's not processed by under certain guidelines, but is there any way to use some of the protein that we harvest in any way to dovetail into or create any additional food source or anything for a program like this, or would you consider brainstorming a little bit afterwards as to any way that we could use some of the protein hunters create in this area to feed?
So the best way to do it, because is the club a nonprofit?
Yes.
So because you're a nonprofit, you don't have to, you're not held to the FDA standards. And so what happens in that world is that technically you can partner your nonprofit with a food pantry, which is probably your best case scenario, because they have kitchens. That's pretty critical in the construct that you're putting on the table. And so because of that, you're not held to the FDA standards, and therefore the food can be processed in what would be conventional for a hunter, but non-conventional from an FDA standard. So I would still, just to be sure, because it's an international organization and I want to make sure that we're protecting you legally, I would ask that question to the legal team at the international level. As I go into SCI, the scenario that you just painted is happening. So I don't think you're gonna run into an issue there.
They do it in Iowa quite a bit.
Correct, so I don't think you're gonna run into an issue. I would still float it, because you need to understand what they're doing in Iowa to make sure that you're not gonna get hit on the back end with any liability.
I just think it would be a neat thing as a continuum of something like this, if this is something we choose to do, that it's just something, just additional community resources made available
Right.
by SCI.
Correct.
Your community is being supported, vice versa.
Anybody else have any questions? Comments or anything? No? Ron, thanks for your time, I appreciate it.